Hello everyone, thank you for taking the time to attend the FTC Safeguards Rule presentation. We'll be covering the requirements of the regulation, how the regulation impacts financial institutions, and how those institutions can get compliant. I'm Cheston Cox, founder and CEO of Ubiquian, an IT consulting company where we make technology your greatest advantage. So let's jump right into it. So high-level agenda here. We're first going to discuss what the FTC is, the Federal Trade Commission. Then we'll touch on the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act before getting into the FTC Safeguards Rule. We'll talk about the rules covered entities are and its requirements, and it'll allow us to dive deeper into the Information Security Plan requirements, that's the WISP. Any exemptions, any penalties for non-compliance. Finally, we'll discuss how we at Ubiquian can get you compliant to avoid those penalties and then capitalize on a more secure environment. The Federal Trade Commission, or the FTC, has been around for over 100 years with the mission of protecting people from damaging business practices by enforcing a variety of antitrust and consumer protection laws. The FTC is put in place to protect people. It's not here to hurt businesses either, but the businesses do need to abide by its laws. So in 1999, the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, or GLBA, was signed into law as a response to a series of cases where banks sold consumer information, which led to identity theft and fraud. So the act itself requires institutions, financial institutions that is, to define their information sharing practices to their consumers and protect the consumer sensitive data, our data, which is labeled as GLBA privacy rule. And because the FTC enforces consumer protection laws, they're responsible for enforcing the privacy rule. So then comes the FTC Standards for Safeguarding Customer Information, long name, easier known as the FTC Safeguards Rule. We like that name. It's been around since 2003. It's been amended to keep pace with new technology and threats. So after public comments, allowing people to really comment in and see how it's going to affect them and their businesses, the rule came into effect on June 9, 2023. So if you're watching this and you're a covered financial institution and have not completed your written information security plan, you're currently non-compliant with the FTC Safeguards Rule. But you're here now, and Ubiquian will work directly with you to get you compliant. So if you're wondering if you're a financial institution subject to the FTC Safeguards Rule, you probably are. Here's a non-exhaustive list of covered entities that need to be compliant. So there's a wide range of entities, right, that range from any firm that prepares taxes, to mortgage lenders, brokers, check cashiers, motor vehicle dealers, even credit counselors, and financial advisors. Really, it's just any institution that uses sensitive consumer information such as social security numbers, credit card account information, really just any data that if compromised could lead to the harm, loss, or unauthorized access to consumer finances. So let's talk about the actual FTC Safeguards Rule requirement, the fun stuff. So I love how simple and matter of fact they put this. The FTC Safeguards Rule requires covered financial institutions to develop, implement, and maintain an information security program with administrative, technical, and physical safeguards designed to protect customer information. It's loaded, okay? But thankfully, they get a little more specific about what needs to be in the information security program. Before we get to that, I want to explain something to look out for when we talk about customers, right? Consumers. And it's really shown here in the last sentence. The rule covers information about your own customers and information about customers of other financial institutions that have provided that data to you. For example, imagine that you're an outsourced financial institution like a tax professional, a bookkeeper, etc., that has one customer that's a large financial institution. Now, if that large financial institution has 100 customers, the rule asserts that you now have 101 customers. So why is that? It's really about access. If you have access to non-public personal information, sensitive information of a customer or consumer, you still need to protect that data. Okay, so now we've gotten to the meat of the FTC Safeguards Rule, the Information Security Program. So let's read through this. Your Information Security Program must be written, which is why it's called the WISP, or Written Information Security Plan, and it must be appropriate to the size and complexity of your own business, the nature and scope of your activities, and the sensitivity of the information at issue. So now we could be saying, okay, great, more ambiguity. Or we can say, hey, more ambiguity, right? It's probably somewhere in the middle. What they're really trying to do is say that one size does not fit all, right? And a little bit of ambiguity is good for us because then there's no real right or wrong answer. And if that makes sense for your business, then it makes sense for the WISP. So the objective of the WISP can be summed up to protect your customers' information. So there are 10 elements to the WISP. Designate a qualified individual to implement and supervise your WISP. Conduct a risk assessment. Design and implement safeguards to those risks. Regularly monitor and test said safeguards, train your staff, monitor your service providers, keep your WISP current, create an written incident response plan, report to your board of directors, and notify of a data breach. So the first one, the WISP requires that you designate a qualified individual to implement and supervise the information security program. So when they say qualified, they don't mean someone who has the technical chops to implement administrative, technical, and physical safeguards. What they really mean is someone who is more familiar or the best familiar with the business processes and policies to ensure that the program is appropriate and complete for the business. So that could be an employee, an affiliate, service provider, for example. But ultimately, you want someone that's going to continue to be fully engaged and responsible for the nature of the security plan. So Ubiquian, we recommend that you choose an employee at a senior leadership level who's least likely to turn over and lead the company, right, to minimize changes to the plan and reporting requirements. So conduct a risk assessment. So this is an important step because it's really the foundation of the WISP, but there's a lot of confusion about it. For a proper risk assessment, you need to take into account of what information is managed by your company, and where it's stored. So it could be typically electronic, which is on computers or cloud, or even physically copies, stored in a closet somewhere. We hope not, right? But then you can conduct a risk assessment to determine what risks and threats to that stored information exist. But here's where some of the confusion lies in. It says that assessments must be written and include criteria for evaluating those risks. But there's an exemption to that part. It says if your company has less than 5,000 clients, 5,000, the assessment does not need to be written and does not need to include criteria for evaluating those risks. However, you still need to have a risk assessment to satisfy the WISP requirements, which is, again, the FTC Safeguards Rule requirement. So written and include criteria, what does that really mean? It means that you don't need to have a risk assessment document, electronic or physical, if you're audited, and you don't need to base your risk assessment on a standard or criteria. But I ask, okay, how do you conduct a proper assessment on something without knowing what you're assessing for? So for example, when Ubiquian conducts risk assessments for our clients, so as required, we base our assessment on the CIA triad, right? Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That's a criteria. And we provide that assessment to our clients so they're tracking the threats to mitigate, and that's written. But because there's a lot of confusion and misinformation, a lot of companies decide to forego the assessment altogether. That's a mistake because the risk assessment is very much still required. So as a warning, any company that offers a WISP without mentioning a risk assessment is putting you at risk of non-compliance and penalties. I'll say it again. Please do not use a provider or tool to create a WISP that does not base the WISP on a risk assessment. It's just wrong. So at Ubiquian, we always conduct a risk assessment written and with criteria, regardless of the size and scope of the business, because it's foundational to the WISP and because of what comes next, right? So just to wrap this up, you'll need to conduct periodic assessments when there are significant changes to administrative, technical, and physical controls of the technical landscape to protect customer information. So as hinted, here's what comes next. So design and implement safeguards to control the risks identified through your risk assessment. So again, this is why it's important to have a verbose risk assessment, because if you implement safeguards based off the risk assessment, what better way to do that than by putting it in a document which is written with the criteria, right? So I won't read through all of them, but the standouts to this are to implement access controls, encrypt customer data, implement multi-factor authentication or MFA, and maintain an activity and access log of customer data. It really does not, make sense to create an information security program without having implemented safeguards to that customer data. So implementing safeguards based off the risk assessment, it really takes up most of the time of the WISP compliance and FTC compliance, but that's why Ubiquian is here to help you through that. So monitor your service providers is next. The goal here is to ensure that your service providers understand that your company handles very sensitive data, right? Customer data. If they in turn will be accessing your systems, they need to be able to handle that data with the highest level of care. So they should be assessed for suitability to handle the information on their own systems if they're being transferred, to their own systems. Hopefully not. But you really should avoid service providers that decide to jump in and offer a wide range of services without first understanding your company's data handling procedures and landscape, right? All too often we see companies saying, oh, we can handle, any type of data, any type of, situation in the landscape or IT landscape, without fully understanding how relevant and how important and critical that data is that the company is actually managing, and that's dangerous. So train your staff. So while this requirement sounds simple and straightforward, it's arguably the most important when it comes to securing your company and its data. Phishing attacks, for example, which are malicious emails or messages designed to trick employees into clicking on links or providing sensitive information. It's the number one case and cause of business hacks, right? Number one. So providing that cybersecurity awareness training and requiring refreshers on a periodic basis is critically important to mitigate some of those threats. All right, keep your information security program current, right? If there are any changes to your company operations, such as any administrative, technical, or physical changes, you'll want to make sure that your security program accounts for that. When we, Ubiquian, write your WISP, we work with you to make it broad enough so that you're not having to update the program for every small change to your environment. We want to capture the significant ones. So in the case of a security event, such as a data breach, which we all certainly plan to avoid, you'll need to have an incident response plan in place. So to dictate what all needs to be in this plan with the big items of what processes your company will follow in such an event, such as roles and responsibilities and communication plan. So with us, Ubiquian, we'll develop this incident response plan for you and draft a communication plan to any affected parties as well as to authorities. So report to your board of directors. So this requirement asks that the designated qualified individual of a company report to its board of directors once a year with an assessment of the company's compliance. So if your company doesn't have a board of directors, the report must go to a senior officer responsible for your information security program. This goes back to what we recommended at first, right, about the qualified individual. So we recommended that the designated qualified individual already be a senior leader in the company. So really, once a WISP is created with this individual, the requirement is already done. However, this requirement is also exempt from companies that have less than 5,000 consumers. But really, there's little to no extra work to this if you follow the recommendation and designate a qualified individual with a senior leader in the company. So finally, we're at the last of the requirements. Now, there used to only be 9 elements to the WISP, but there was yet another revision that added the data breach notification requirement. So companies subject to the Safeguards Rule are required to notify the FTC no later than 30 days after the discovery of a security breach. This added requirement really should be a surprise. So many states have its own breach notification requirement. So to avoid any duplicate work, we recommend that the breach notification is extensive enough to cover both the state and federal requirements, and we, Ubiquian, will do this for you. Okay, so throughout the presentation, I mentioned a few exemptions to the FTC Safeguards Rule if you have less than 5,000 consumers, clients, customers, whichever word you want to use. I compiled them here. So the required risk assessment does not need to be a formal document. It does not need to include criteria for evaluation, nor does it need to identify how the risk will be mitigated or accepted. However, making it clear again, you still need to have a risk assessment. Okay. Next, periodic penetration testing is not required. A written incident response plan isn't required, but highly recommended, of course. And the qualified individual does not need to report to board supervisors. So why do we care about the FTC Safeguards Rule? Penalties. So not only do the ramifications of a last company, include data breaches, which again we want to avoid, and it is damaging to a company's reputation. There are legal ramifications too. The FTC could send what is called the Notice of Penalty Offenses, which contain a list of offenses that the FTC determines to be a violation of the rule and fine you for it. So these fines are not cheap. They go over $50,000 per violation. For example, so we know that there are at least 10 requirements to the FTC Safeguards Rule. So unless you want to multiply that 50,000 by 10, take the time to work through the requirements of the rule or work closely with an external provider to get you across that finish line. An external provider like Ubiquian. So you knew this was coming. Here's how Ubiquian helps you with all this. Ubiquian will conduct a thorough evaluation of your IT landscape to include its policies and procedures to develop that required risk assessment. We'll collaborate with you and your team to develop a mitigation strategy to those risks and elevate the security posture of your landscape. Then we can write out your information security program to satisfy the requirements of the WISP and FTC Safeguards Rule. So remember the other requirements. We'll also develop the written incident response plan, which will check the box for both the federal and state requirement. We'll then wrap it all up, put a bow on it, and send it to you. So all of this will be done for you with little time commitment from you and your team. Not only will this bring you up to compliance with the FTC Safeguards Rule to avoid any costly penalties, it'll also enhance your reputation by building customer trust and demonstrating your commitment to securing customer information. So you'll receive from us a high quality product with a high quality service as a comprehensively low cost solution. All right, so that brings us to the end. I hope that you enjoyed this presentation and you gained valuable insights into the FTC Safeguards Rule, its requirements, and how Ubiquian can meet your need. So thank you for joining us. I look forward to working with you and making technology your greatest advantage.